We know it's going well when you want us to shut up. That's good. That's good. 2 minutes. All right, you will be back in sharing mode in 1 moment. But before you do that, I want to now introduce... have you heard of this thing called Kismet Connection? Yes. You know, it's just meant to be when you meet someone. And that's a lot of what's happening in this room. And when Berni and I met, who you're going to hear from next, it was a moment of, we know nothing about each other, but all we know is that we're friends and we're going to play. It was like that. So I am delighted to introduce a new friend of mine, Miss Berni. Come on up, and she's going to share herself with you.
Oh, thank you, Joe. All right. Well, I know what happens after lunch. Thankfully, Hillary did our chair yoga, and Lori, thank you for sharing what you did. When I got here, I was a bit raw. My son just had melanoma removed, so I'm a little raw. Just take a beat. So, Lori, thank you for sharing, because it gives me the hope that everything's going to be fine. I love that you said that you're a warrior, because that's exactly what you are. And Joe had mentioned something about the power of words. Has anybody heard of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey? And the beautiful, wonderful way that he describes what every hero's journey is. And every one of us in here is the star of our own story. Now, has anybody in here had a movie made about him? Okay. Well, let me tell you about this little interesting journey that I had, because I feel like my story is a lot about the journey of really self-discovery. And I believe that courage comes from that willingness and that awareness to take ownership of that. I was born in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and I was 4 years old, and we were about 2 weeks away from evacuating from Saigon. A little girl and I were playing in the courtyard, and she went missing. And I didn't know who that little girl was, but my aunt, who was watching us, had come in outside from inside, and she'd wondered where the little girl was. And she had blamed me for not watching her. And I didn't understand why she was so upset. And this little girl, apparently, she was not even more than 2 years old. I'd never heard anything about that little girl. My mother and I did evacuate. We went to Grand Island, Nebraska. My mother and father had met during the Vietnam War, and so my father was waiting for us in the U.S. We came to the United States and got here, and I felt like a total outcast, because with the Vietnam War being really unpopular, and my mother having a really difficult time assimilating, trying to learn the language, just even grocery shopping. But she had a deep sadness, and I didn't understand what that was. And I just always assumed that there was something that she was upset about having to uproot where she came from. But she was always mad, and she was always mad at me and took out a lot on me. So I never realized where that came from. But I knew that I wanted to make her happy. I wanted my father to make sure that I made him happy. And most of the childhood, if anybody resonates with this, that I never felt that I was good enough. Never felt that I was good enough for love. And even as my siblings came along, no matter what they did, I would be the one that would be the brunt of all of the beatings. She was just angry. And so taking that in, I thought, if I were just to do this, if I could just achieve this. And so most of my life, I was always looking for reasons to check mark, getting a new title. How could I actually make my parents proud? And it never seemed to be enough. My mother never changed. So when I got older and started to take more of a leap away from home, that's when I started to discover my true talents. Like, you know what? I was somebody at home, and now that I'm away from home, I'm a different person. Has that happened to others? Right? Because we tell this story to ourselves about what our home is and what we believe to be our story. So when I went to college, I was also working full-time at a bank. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, actually, that part of the achievement was I'm going to work full-time because I have to work in order to go to school, and I'm still going to get my degree, but I'm going to pay for it all myself, which I accomplished. But I never felt like there was anything fulfilling about it. It was just almost like doing it as though there was almost an expectation. I needed to get a college degree. 20 years into my career, I had a very difficult boss. My boss was sexually harassing me. And because of the toxic work environment we were in, this was in 2008 with the financial collapse. If everybody remembers the financial collapse, the banking industry had to be saved. There was a lot of tension already. And in here I have a boss who won't take me seriously. And so there are rumors about, I had 3 miscarriages during that time that he became the president of the bank. It was about a month after my 3rd miscarriage that I said it was time to go. Everything that I had worked for to establish this ideal career, a title, wanting to be able to make a certain level, right? Do we not do that to ourselves where you say, if I accomplish this, I got the title, I'm getting the paycheck, I need the house, we do all those things. And realizing that I had this American dream coming to the United States, and it had turned into a nightmare. Shortly after that, I remember really going into a dark, dark place. I had quit my job, and everybody thought I was insane because this was during the recession. And I didn't know who I was anymore. And I went through this whole identity crisis because I only knew of myself, and I measured myself and my worth based on those external validations of my title and my next title. And now, even though I was going home to think about what I wanted to do next, I didn't feel that I was worthy to do anything next. Mother didn't have enough of a title for me. It was fortunate, though, that I had some time to try to figure out what I wanted to do. And I started really a path of really looking at how spirituality, if there was something for me to actually grow into, that I wanted to be able to understand that everybody else probably has been through, especially with the recession, that's something similar. So I had this great idea. I heard that there was a production company in here. I had this great idea for a TV show. And I thought, you know what, if you can do travel to help you maybe out of your rut so that it would be transitionary, maybe that'd be a great TV show. Take people out to different places, the venerated places like Sedona. Anybody been to Sedona? Oh, it's so beautiful, but something about, yes, there's something that you get a call. When I went to pitch my idea, of course, they said, you have absolutely no experience in the TV world. And I said, I know that, but I've had corporate career, in my corporate career, I was doing corporate videos. But nope, we have a lot of people in this industry, and so, but why don't you think about some other ideas and then maybe pitch it to us, and maybe we can create a TV show, but it didn't pan out. So I thought maybe the best thing for me to do is actually just do a project on my own. So here's a 20-year corporate career woman who has 2 small children. And I thought, if I could go and maybe do a documentary about spirituality, maybe then I could get an inroad. When I'd had my 3rd miscarriage, I'd met somebody who was a spiritual teacher, and he actually brought a lot of people together to work on really the I am process. Has anybody heard about the I am I am affirmations. So he was the one that actually invited me to go to India because he was getting together a group of people who were going to speak about spirituality in India. And I thought, well, that's kind of what I wanted to do. I really wanted to be able to go someplace like India. That's where everybody wants to go to have their ashram experience and yoga and their spiritual evolution. So I went there because I was going to have access to all these speakers. And the speakers, I wanted to be able to have them tell me their backstory. What brought them into this awareness of their own spirituality? And as I got there, now, as a corporate person and any type A personalities in the room, and recovering perfectionists and control freaks and high achievers, right? Like, I get there and I don't want anybody to know that I've had no experience in filming whatsoever. And I did have the gumption of like hiring film crew that were there. It was partially budget related. It was like, I'm going to have film crew there that knows what they're doing and the area itself. And it was the best decision that I made. When I went to interview, it never worked out because there was like a glitch with the sound. There was a glitch with the lighting. It just didn't work out, and I was starting to really stress out. So when we finally finished with this initial conference where the speakers were gathered, we ended up going through India for really just to see some of the sites, like the Taj Mahal. Anybody been to the Taj Mahal? It's so beautiful, right? Bucket list item. Well, on the way to Taj Mahal, I had a moment that changed my life forever. And I think that there's always, when we talk about kind of this journey of sorts and how we come together in sharing our stories, I had a cobra moment. So when I heard that there was a snake that was over here climbing around for Susan, I thought, thank God that wasn't for me. The cobra moment that I had, because I felt like everything was about to fall apart, was that cobra moment actually woke me up because I was so scared and that there was so much energy running up and down me that I didn't understand what was going on. I just thought that cobra was coming after me. And all of that, later that evening, I started looking at the footage and realized that the cobra actually wasn't coming for me. The cobra was trying to get away. And in that time that I was being asked, when I was so afraid, why was I having such a reaction? I'd said something very profound to myself that made me really upset, and realized that there was probably more to the story, and I didn't think I was enough because before I left for India, I was told that because I didn't have journalism experience, that I should just be behind the camera when I'm interviewing. But when I watched myself and the things that I was saying resonated for others that were there, that I didn't think that I was enough to even be part of this story. And in a moment where I was so afraid, I realized that somebody had asked me, are you afraid of dying? Are you afraid that you're going to get bitten by the snake? And I said, I wasn't that I was afraid about dying so much as that I hadn't lived fully before dying. Anyone else ever feel like that? It was the moment that did change everything because the story was no longer about the speakers and their backstory. It became Berni's journey. And the speakers wanted to be in my story. And that's how Berni's journey came about. And being able to have a movie that I thought it was supposed to be about others, and rather it was about my story of a very difficult transition in my life that became very transformational. In the process of finishing, it was one thing to be able to be in India and have this amazing experience. And in the movie industry, they say it's in the can, it's done. So it's one thing to have a movie in the can. It's another to come home and do the editing, right? So there's a whole structure for story. And that's when I learned about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. So as we were taking all the footage together and we're putting it together, I'm crying through most of it. I didn't want anything to be in there that I thought people are going to judge me for it, because it's already emotional. I'm already crying. My editor, thankfully, said, well, that's nice, that's how you feel about it, but it doesn't make the story very interesting. Because what story would you be interested in watching that was completely about this perfect person and their perfect life? Right? And not only that, but the construct of the story. What I had, because I didn't expect to be the story, is that I didn't have any of the backstory. So we came home, and it was about a year. And my husband, by the way, was not happy about this project because I'd put everything in our credit card. And the credit card was just dialing. It was just ringing up. So when coming back, I had to show him that this is the footage, this is the plan, and brought people together. And I will tell you, it was because I was just so passionate about what had happened that was contagious for others. And I learned that being really raw about, just being vulnerable, that I don't know. I had to stop pretending that I didn't know everything, that it was my first project. And instead, I really fell into this place of like, I really want to learn from you. And it seemed like people were coming out of the woodworks. So in 2015, the movie was done and it premiered. And as I'm sitting in the theater, I'm watching Berni's journey. In the hero's journey, you have the known, you have a story, you have the character. That character goes into the unknown and the unordinary world. And there takes a lot of courage to take that leap. Have you felt like you were just in an ordinary world, but you want that slice of the unordinary? It's called a threshold. My threshold, I said yes to India to go there, but the threshold for me was that Cobra moment. The Cobra moment that scared my wits enough that it changed my perspective on everything. I went into a whole nother world. And I didn't think that having the opportunity to go through India and the way that it all came together and watching my movie, and I was like, no, I planned to be the producer and the director, but I definitely didn't plan on being the star. So when I saw myself on screen, I realized that is probably the most important thing to recognize, is that in our story, we are the hero and you are the star. And can you soak that in? We're so looking outside of ourselves, and yet, as part of the journey, it always comes back to where we are. The inner journey is probably the most important journey that we'll ever have. So watching that, what it did lead to was nothing that I ever expected. I was doing all these film festivals and talking about the experience, and then it led to a TED Talk. And this TED Talk, I decided that I was going to start my story being that little girl in Vietnam who was responsible for some little girl that got lost. Ultimately, I found out that little girl who I thought was a cousin, my mother always told us it was a cousin. We never spoke about this little girl. Finally found out my mother had divorced my dad. She admitted to us that that little girl was my sister. I already had felt all this guilt about this little girl who went missing, to learn that she was actually my sister. I wanted to do another movie because I thought if we could go to Vietnam and maybe get a documentary about a little girl that went missing, maybe we could find her. In 2012, my mother died. So I thought that the story was gone. I thought that was the end of the opportunity to find Rose. That was the name of my sister. She was named after my father's favorite aunt. So when I'd asked my dad, why didn't we ever talk about her? He said, well, she wasn't my daughter. Not my problem. Again, when we think about story and everybody's perspective, my mother had her story about what happened. My dad had his story about what happened. And I never felt like we could ever get the truth. In 2019, I received a call from a cousin. The cousin who had just done a family tree DNA test. He said, I think I need to reach out to Berni because I remember something about this, but he received an email from a woman who was looking for anyone who had served in the Vietnam War. And she said, it was because I was lost on the streets of Saigon when I was 2 years old. And in that moment, when he read that email to me, I didn't have to know if that DNA was a match. I knew in my heart she was my sister. And we confirmed it. And the first time, I learned at 11 o'clock a.m. about this email. And by 11 p.m., I'd had a 2-hour conversation with her. And it's funny because I felt like I was on Tinder a little bit, like, I don't want to be overzealous, but I really want to talk to you, like, right now. And so it was like this slow relationship building in a matter of 12 hours. After 40 years of being separated, and here I am wanting to talk with her so badly. And I see a picture of her, and she's the spitting image of my mother. We do the DNA test, we confirm it. We have this beautiful reunion in Denver. So she agrees that she's going to come to Vietnam, and we're going to go ahead and do this Finding Rose. And the irony about Finding Rose is that she found us. She found us through the DNA. And the funny line that she tells in the story that was CBS did a story on us is that she said, because here's the irony too. We never spoke about Rose, but her family never told her that she was adopted. It wasn't until her mother let it slip. And she said, why didn't anybody just confirm for me? She said, I looked different. I had a feeling all those years, 40 plus years, and nobody would confirm that she was adopted. Nobody in our family wanted to talk about this. So what the heck was going on? Total mystery. So we go back to Vietnam. My aunt still blames me. But if it weren't for Berni's journey and it seemed like it was an interesting development of things that needed to happen before Rose came into my life, right? There was a construct of the universe creating a story that I would have never thought was possible. And we were still in contact. It's really wonderful. And her daughter actually just my niece invited me to her wedding. And there's only 3 family members invited. And I'm just 4 years into their life. And so this is a huge honor. But in the process of all this, moving from Denver, coming to Sarasota, I'm a newbie here for like 6 months. And I'm, excited about this move and what I'm going to do next. I wanted to finish Finding Rose, but my father, when he saw the news story and he didn't want to be part of it, said, well, the story about you evacuating from Vietnam just 2 weeks before and the little girl that got lost, that's not true. That's a flat out lie. Mind you, my mother's dead and she's not here to be able to respond. But my father proceeds to tell us and the reporter that did the story that my mother had sold her. That my mother had sold her and that she had left because that was the only way that she could get to the United States is with one daughter. Again, when we think about story and all of our beliefs, I don't know what that story is. And I'm sure it'll be uncovered. But my lesson in the whole experience of this filmmaking project is that every step along the way, it required me to understand that no matter what the story was, that I had to own it. I had been running away from that for so long. And no matter what the real story is, I'm telling my story. I'll finish my book. But in the meantime, when Joe was telling me that, you don't have to have all of the answers right now, and I don't. Because all that time that I was worried about being worthy, if it hadn't gone through the whole process of the hero's journey, of being able to cross the threshold and finally come back around and owning my story, because the other thing is I noticed that in a journey, I do believe that with courage, it does require a process. And in the word courage and in journey is the word our. We're all in our own journey. Regardless of what the stories have been in our lives that tell us that we're not enough, that the limiting beliefs, hold on to that. And the words are powerful because what we think about, we bring about. And then with the O, owning your story, and you unleashing any limiting beliefs so that you know that there's the unlocking of your power, your purpose, and your potential. I didn't know that I could actually make a movie, but everything that had happened along the way, I feel now the R is that I'm in the regeneration of being able to reevaluate where am I in my life now. And that I can be in this place comfortably because I know now that there is worth here. And it didn't have to come from anybody else. That choice to make a big leap and many, many leaps, that I know that I'll land on my feet and I'll reevaluate because I'm just waiting for the next journey. That I know that it'll be part of the story with including courage every step of the way. Thank you.